Hi Greg, can you say something about you, trial, and the reason why you came to Poland this year?
Sure, absolutely. So the reason that we came to Poland this year is because in 1999 we played in Warsaw. And that night that we played in Warsaw was a night that we didn't think the show was actually going to happen. We showed up at the show very late. We didn't think anyone was going to stay. We had no way of getting in touch with the people at the show. And when we showed up at the show that night, everybody stayed. Like 200 people, or I don't even know how many people were there, stayed and waited to see us, even though they didn't know who we were. And they helped us load our equipment in, our merchandise. They fed us food, and it was like we were part of a family when we showed up here in Warsaw. It wasn't like anyone was taking the show for granted. Do you know what I mean, taking it for granted? It was like there was something meaningful in it for them. And hardcore is very meaningful for us. So when we showed up that night, and everybody waited to see us and treated us like family, we never, ever, ever, ever forgot that. And Poland has always been very important to us, and we've wanted to come back ever since. And when we decided to play shows again after our bassist died, Brian Redmond died 2 years ago, we wanted to come back to Eastern Europe as much as we could, but especially Warsaw, because it meant so much to us years ago. So we're very, very happy to be here tonight. I mean, every band says, we're very happy to be here tonight. It's good to be here, you know? We're really, really, really happy to be in Warsaw. Like, as soon as we crossed the border from Germany, I kept turning to Robert saying, I love Poland, I love Poland. He's like, I know. But it's awesome. It's like, it means so much to us to be here. Like, it was incredible tonight.
From my perspective, you are quite a busy person. Can you describe some of the social projects that you are involved in?
Sure. One of the social projects that I'm involved in is a project called 100 for Haiti. After the earthquake, I sailed on a sailboat with 10 people, some of them punk rockers, hardcore people, to Haiti from Miami, Florida. We sailed on a sailboat that had 10,000 pounds of medical supplies and food on the sailboat. And we sailed for 8 days and 8 nights. And I don't sail. I don't know anything about sailing. So I was like really, really scared for 8 days and 8 nights. But we got down to Haiti very soon after the earthquake and gave out all these supplies and food. And I'd been to Haiti once before that. So when the boat left, I stayed in Haiti. And I walked into the country and I looked for friends of mine to make sure they were okay. And there's a doctor that I know in Port-au-Prince who gives away medicine and medical care for free when people can't afford it, when they don't have enough money. So I promised him that I would help him. And when I came back to the States, I talked to some of my good friends and we formed 100 for Haiti, which is a group which tries to send money to that doctor, but also tries to do projects which are sustainable. And what I mean is that when you send money to somebody to help them over and over again, that's not sustainable. You create dependency in that person on the money that you send. So what 100 for Haiti is doing now that we're starting to grow to more friends being involved, is to create projects that are sustainable, to create opportunities for Haitians to make their own living and to build their own sense of community. That is something that they can continue doing if we support their desire to survive, right? So that's what 100 for Haiti is doing right now, and people can find out about that at 100forhaiti.org. And if they have any questions, they can email me info@100forhaiti.org. I can tell them all about it.
You are well known as an inspiring speaker and good entertainer. In your movies Flight from Death and Philosopher Kings and Lyrics, you speak about very serious topics. Philosophy of life, DIY ethics, death, dealing with cruelty. How do you combine all these aspects in your speeches? Are these things based on your personal experience? Why have you decided to talk about them?
Okay, not every presentation that I give has all of these ideas, right? Every presentation has some of them somewhere in there, but it's really hard to combine like being entertaining and talking about DIY ethics and talking about life and talking about death, because sometimes that's not, what audiences want to hear every time, right? So I do my best to try to put as many of those ideas as I can in when I speak or when I present. Do you say the reason? Is that what you want to know? What is the reason that I'm doing these things, or like, or
How do you combine all these aspects? Okay.
Oh yeah, I combine them very poorly. That's how I combine them.
Are these things based on your personal experience?
Okay, that's cool. Okay, so I'm rooted in DIY ethics and in the punk rock and hardcore communities ever since I was 14 years old. So I'm 40 now, right? So it's, 24 years, a lot. I don't know, 26 years, something, whatever the math is, right? Math is not my strength. So I've been involved in punk rock and hardcore for a very long time. So the ideas of doing it yourself and maintaining your own power and your own sovereignty and your own authority are very important to me. They're important to all of us. This is what we value our scene on. I mean, the reason that a show can happen here is because we built this. You know, we all built this. You built this. We all built it. So those ideas are very important to me in my day-to-day life. Maintaining sovereignty over my life. The reason I work for myself is because I can't imagine with the seconds that I have left in my life, with the number of heartbeats that I have left. And it's a very specific number. It might be 1 billion. It might be 100. I might be dead in 5 minutes. I can't imagine working every single day for someone else's dream with none of my passion involved. That to me makes me sick. Even when I say it, I feel sick when I think about that. So these ideas that I maybe share from the stage or that I talk about are ideas that I try to live every day. Now, at 40 years old, I could have a car, like a Ferrari and a house and 25 kids and a mansion or whatever. But what's important to me is maintaining my sense of sovereignty and maintaining the value system that I have as much as anyone can, right? Because we all have to compromise at some point, in order to survive or what have you. But these ideas are ideas that I try to live as much as I can every day. So, and ideas about life and death, for example, like I talked about Brian Redman, our bassist who died. We've all faced death. We face death every day, even if we're just talking and we're not thinking about death. We face it because it's inevitable. It's going to happen someday. How do we deal with the fact that we're going to die someday? This is a deep psychological question. So I've done a lot of reading over the years and talked to a lot of people about, what do we do in the face of our death? And, I'm quite convinced that the very best thing we could do is A, don't be dead, but B, keep creating. Keep creating life and relationships and love and passion. Keep creating connectedness, even across half the world. Stay in touch with people, add to people's lives. Live with empathy. Listen to people. The great irony is that I speak all the time, but, I try to think of myself as a listener more than a speaker, because that's really what's important to be done in this life, I think.
For a few years, you have been involved in the Legacy project. What is it about?
Is it still actual? Okay. So the Legacy project started at the crematoria of the gas chambers at Birkenau, maybe 8 years ago. I can't remember. I've been to Birkenau many times. And at one point, I was with some friends from Oświęcim, and we were standing where the gas chambers were at Birkenau. And I had this moment where I thought to myself, that if they were in my town, where I grew up in Connecticut, in the United States, there's a health food store, there's a school, there's a gas station, there's a small shop, you know what I mean, a grocery store, right? There is no crematorium, there's no gas chamber, okay? These friends of mine grew up in Oświęcim with the same life, in a sense, that I had, meaning they fell in love, they broke up, they went to play games, they lived like people. They were me and I was them. The difference is they grew up a couple kilometers from the site of one of the greatest mass murders in the history of humanity. And I had this moment and I looked at my friends and I thought, what could I learn from them about reconciliation, about survival, about history, about living history? What could I learn from their parents? What could I learn from their friends, from their grandparents? So what I decided that I wanted to do was come back to Poland and go on tour and talk to people about these things and listen to people about these things. So what ended up happening, I told a friend of mine in the United States about this, and he's a history teacher. And he suggested that we bring students with us, right? So Dave and me and 10 students, age 15, 16, 17, came to Poland, and we talked to people about the legacy of Nazism and survival, reconciliation, hope. And we interviewed people, we interviewed members of the Sonderkommando, we interviewed the barber of the Commandant of Auschwitz, we interviewed people who lived across the street from the camps. We went to Majdanek and we went to Auschwitz-Birkenau, and we went to Treblinka, we went to all of these places. And we talked to people who were there, who were affected by it, who weren't there, who weren't affected by it, right? You know, like young people, to see what we could learn about survival and reconciliation. And then 2 years after that, we took a group of high school students to South Africa to study the legacy of apartheid. Because of course, in Poland, and you don't need this history lesson, but this was our thinking, in Poland, an oppressive force induced terror by invading. In South Africa, an oppressive force induced terror from within with their racism. And we talked to members of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, people who knew Nelson Mandela. We talked to people who were affected by apartheid and people who didn't care about apartheid, like some very wealthy Afrikaners who just read about it on page 4 of the paper, like, oh, there's some black people killed, and didn't care, right? And then next year we're going to South America, where we're going to talk to people about the death squads, because there the terror was not an oppressive force, not from within, but invisible. You fell asleep next to your lover, and the next morning you woke up and they were gone forever. So we're going to go to South America, and then we're going to write a book and talk about all these ideas about reconciliation sometime in the next year or two, and share these ideas. TheLegacyProject.com will have more information on that.
Recently, in Europe we have a growing tide of the right-wing tendencies. For a few years, nationalists and racists have been trying to infiltrate the music scene. They try to use some ideas like straight edge and hardcore for their propaganda and political needs. Have you noticed that? If so, what's your opinion about it?
Yeah, I've definitely noticed. I've noticed it in the last 4 days. I mean, the people in Germany, you know, in Mönchengladbach are talking about the same thing, and the people in Berlin last night were talking about the same thing. They were talking about the infiltration of Nazis and fascists and people with right-wing ideology into the hardcore and punk rock scene, and essentially what is the co-opting of symbols that we have created within punk rock that are meaningful to us. You know, straight edge is an idea. Right? The X on one's hand is an idea. It's a symbol. It's a symbol that we give meaning to. It has no meaning on its own. We give meaning to it, right? But what's been happening is that members of the right wing are taking those symbols as their own and applying their own meaning to them, or using the meaning that we've applied to them for other means, okay? We've seen this happen in history. The swastika wasn't an invention by some brilliant Nazi. The swastika's been around for hundreds of years or thousands of years. They co-opted a symbol, transformed it into their own, and made it something new, something that was evil, something that they could use for their own purposes. Because people need a symbol. They need to believe in something. They need an idea to follow. And that's why in moments where times are very tough politically or economically, people are very vulnerable. They're willing to follow anybody who has a strong voice, who uses a symbol in a powerful way. And it's a time right now in Poland for people to be very, very careful. Just as in the United States years ago, it was a time to be very careful. On 9/11, when those planes hit the World Trade Center, America's heartbeat stopped. And for a day, we all waited to see what would happen and to try to figure out what we were feeling. Because we don't live under the rain of bombs all the time. And when so many people died all at once, we waited, and we didn't know what to do, and we were scared. And what happened was a man named George Bush said, "You're with us or you're with the terrorists, so join me in this war," right? And everyone was scared, and they said, "We're with that idea." and they got on board with a war which has now cost $4 trillion, countless lives in Iraq, right? Everyone was willing to get on board with that idea because we were vulnerable. Well, what's happening right now? We've got an economic collapse happening. Thankfully, you guys, kept your currency, right? So you're not maybe as affected by the economic problems in the West, here in Poland. But still, people are feeling it. So they're vulnerable and they're nervous about what's going to happen for their children. They're in a position now where they're more inclined towards ideas which are safe and secure. And fascist ideas always appear safe and secure because the promise is that they're going to make the trains run on time, right? That was the promise. So you have to be very, 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 very careful. And that's why this event, 11-11-11 is so important. Events like that, always reaching out to new people to get them to stop fascism where it's rearing up and where it's starting. Because all it takes is a few people, and then they'll get more and more and more and more. Fascism is like a virus getting its way into your skin. So you have to be very careful with that. And I wish you well, and I support you in any way I can.
Is discrimination and oppression a problem in United States and hardcore scene?
Discrimination in the US hardcore scene exists in this way. Almost everybody is white. Not because of hatred, but just because hardcore is developed that way. And it's really unfortunate. In the same way that hardcore is developed, that I don't know how many people are here tonight, maybe 200, 300, I don't know. How many women were here out of 200 or 300 people? 30, 40 maybe? Most of the people here were men, okay? And maybe there's 50 women, 60 women, I don't know, but most of the people here were men. The same thing has happened in the United States in terms of racial dynamics in the scene. Almost everybody is white. And I don't know why that is. And I did an interview earlier tonight where we were trying to think about why that is. But it's its own kind of discrimination, because people want to be where they feel safe and where they feel comfortable. And if everybody's white, then people who are of color are not going to necessarily dive right in and say, hey, here I am, I'm part of your scene, right? It's one more hurdle to jump over. Because whenever you try something new, it's a challenge, Whenever you do your first interview, or if you go to your first show, or, fall in love for the first time, it's terrifying, right? So in the United States, racism continues to be a problem. It's very deeply ingrained and has been. America, is very good at slavery. It's something we do well, right? And, we've managed to make it illegal, but the fact remains that opportunities for people of color are far less frequent, and they have far less remuneration, meaning that they are potentially paid less than white counterparts. There are a lot of repercussions to a long-standing tradition of racism in the United States, and there too it needs to be spoken about. So wherever this Westboro Baptist Church, I don't know if you know of these people, they're psychotic. They're from the United States, and they're against the war, and they're against homosexuality, and they're against everything. Wherever they pop up, people need to think of creative approaches to how to protest against them. Ku Klux Klan, all of these militia groups in the United States, they need to be protested against, like the fascists here, creatively. It's like people will want to punch and strike them. Make people laugh at them. Make them seem foolish and stupid for what they're thinking, what they're doing. Make them be the end of the joke. Do you know what I mean? And think creatively, So there's a lot of different ways to be creative about, approaches to these things, and we need them in the United States as well. Yeah. I love you. Thank you for coming. Okay, I'll talk to you very soon. I'm going to wear your hoodie everywhere. Warsaw Straight Edge. Okay.
Do you know the anti-racist action? Is it a popular movement in the United States? What is your opinion about standing strong against discrimination, racism and neo-fascism? Are street actions and manifestations important?
Yeah, well, I mean, anti-racist action is popular in the United States insofar as any anti-racist action is popular, meaning the majority of the United States, I don't think, cares, okay? I mean, it's not that they're for racism, they're just not anti-racism or for racism. They just go about their day like mindless drones as if they have nothing to care about other than themselves. Now, for many of those people, it's out of necessity. They're just trying to get by each day. But you know, there is a necessity for people to be informed about these things and for people to be aware of the fact that racism exists in the world, even if you don't see it in front of you, because you tend to be blind to those things that you do not see in front of you. So with that in mind, it's important for street actions to take place and for people to be protesting or for people to leaflet or flyer or spread the word, use the internet creatively by any means necessary, put up interviews, that sort of thing, so that racism just continues to be pushed to the side or at least talked about or dealt with. The human tendency is towards those who are like them. We feel comfortable with people who are like us psychologically. That doesn't mean that we have to be around people like us all the time, though. And it doesn't mean that we should push away those who are different. We can embrace people who are different and learn from them. But we have to be aware of these tendencies, and we have to be aware of the fact that oftentimes being ignorant feels great because it's safe. You know, if you're ignorant of something, if you're lazy, you get to lay around all day long and just relax. So to keep engaged and keep our brains engaged is very critically important, very important.
Many people recognize any subculture and counterculture as a threat. What can you say about getting involved in punk hardcore scene? Can it be inspirational or destructive?
Okay. Punk and hardcore can be very inspirational and it can be destructive, okay? It has both tendencies. Yeah, no problem. I think that involvement in punk and hardcore can, more than anything else, be deeply inspirational. Because one of the core ideas is that we do things ourselves. One of the core ideas in punk and hardcore is that we hopefully embrace other people and that we allow for different ideas to come up. And we're willing to challenge ourselves to think of new ideas and think of new approaches to being alive and to how to live and work together most effectively. This is tremendously important. It happens all the time in punk and hardcore. People in punk and hardcore don't realize that revolutions throughout history have been started with far less people than were in this room tonight. The potential power of the integrity of people who come to punk and hardcore shows is limitless, meaning there's so much that we can do with the passion and energy in punk and hardcore if we focus it outside of the room that we're in when the show is happening. So it's critical that people remember that and think to themselves, how can they work together collectively? How can they challenge themselves to think of new ideas? If they've never heard of being vegan, if they've never heard of anarchism, if they've never heard of animal liberation or earth liberation or what those things mean, and they have stereotypes about them, they're the ones who are missing out, because no one wants to live in a world filled with more death or more pain. That's antithetical to what it means to be human. We repel from pain. If I was to pinch you right now, you'd throw the laptop at me and try to get away. You wouldn't say, pinch me more. You know, I mean, that would be very strange if you did, right? We repel from pain. We don't want more of it. We don't want it in our communities. We don't want it for our children. We don't want it for our families. We don't want it for our friends. So to be involved in punk rock leads us towards a place where we can diminish the amount of pain that's in the world if we work together and engage our minds.
I've got a question.
Sure.
Because I saw on YouTube some time ago the small movie for a group of people who call their straight edge, but totally Nazi. The group of people who we are a straight edge, but with a Celtic cross on it, on a swastik, and what's the wrong from these people?
This is what I was talking about before, that, you know, when someone co-opts a symbol, they take a symbol and change that symbol into their own. That's something that needs to just be communicated about. You need to seek out these people and make them look like idiots. I mean, there's just no way around it. I mean, because anyone can co-opt any symbol, you know?
But they call them, they're hardcore, they are straight edge, but it's fucking Nazi.
Right. Well, they do that. They do that to bother you, and to upset you, and to take the symbol that you hold dear and to corrupt it and make it into something else. You know, they do that specifically to get the reaction out of you that you have right now, and they will continue doing that as long as it has that reaction. So the thought is to think about how to respond to that. Okay, you know, if somebody comes at you and they're aggressive and you punch them back, I promise they're going to punch you again, and you're going to keep punching each other back and forth. If they come at you with this symbol and they call it straight edge and it's actually Nazism, and you laugh in their face, it disempowers them. If you make them look like an idiot and you dance around them like they're a fool, that's, you know, and this is just an idea, right? You know, that's a way to disempower them, because they are empowered based on their own perception of their own strength. And their own strength is an idea that they have defined and they have created that has no tangible value whatsoever. There is no value to the idea that someone is stronger than another person, that a man is stronger than a woman, that my force is more strong than somebody else's force. That's a concept, okay? And it can be undermined with more powerful concepts. So, you know, think in terms of laughter and making fun of these people. I mean, because they're like clowns, you know what I mean? So laugh at them like clowns. I mean, that's really an appropriate first step. And if they continue on, then get creative from there, you know? There's no limit to what should be done for people like that. Yeah.
What can you say nowadays to hardcore and punk kids to inspire them?
Yeah, totally. I think that in terms of hardcore and punk rock, to get people inspired is just keep coming to shows and keep challenging yourself. I mean, I remember when I went to my first shows, okay, long time ago, like in the United States, Husker Du, Bad Brains, Circle Jerks, Agnostic Front. I mean, like a long time ago, right? And I watched these bands, and it was like during a time when hardcore was getting huge, you know, and, you know, like watching the Bad Brains in like 1987, 1988 was like, holy shit, what's happening here? Like when they went on stage, it was like an atomic bomb went off. Like it wasn't like anything I've ever seen since. And I was terrified seeing Agnostic Front and back in the day, or like, you know, whomever bands. I was terrified, but even being terrified, I kept coming to the shows because I was thinking there's something of value here, right? So we have managed to create something of value in punk and hardcore over the years. And this is a living legacy now of years of people being involved. It's not about trial. It's not about the bands that came before trial or the bands that came before them. It's about the people who are coming next. Okay? So when people continue to come to shows and they buy records and they trade ideas and they communicate with one another, they are setting a legacy for the next generation of people who are coming. Someone at this show tonight was at their first hardcore show ever. I don't know who that was. Someone was there, okay? First show ever. That person is leaving here tonight, hopefully going, right? They felt something, you know? And it's like, I wish in our culture that we felt something more often, because we walk around sometimes like feeling like afraid to feel. And in hardcore, it's okay to feel. I remember years ago in Leeuwarden in the Netherlands, we played a song that we played tonight, When There's Nothing Left to Lose. And I said to the audience, you know, we feel so safe not feeling. What if for the next 3 minutes, we threw away all the rules and all the ideas about what we're allowed to feel, and instead just let ourselves feel whatever came up, okay? And we played the song, everyone went crazy, dancing, screaming, doing whatever, okay? And after the show, everyone came up, we talked. After everyone was walking away, one woman walks up to me and she says, when you played that one song, the song about feeling, I stood in the back of the room by myself and I screamed as loud as I could and I was crying. That's what hardcore is about, that woman right there. So that's where the inspiration comes from. People like that who feel something, whether they're in the back of the room or up front singing along. So if people come to punk and hardcore in a zine, at a show, from their friend, MP3, whatever, and they feel something, hold on to that feeling, because the ability to feel is precious, and that's what hardcore can provide. So thank you for the interview.
Everybody, thank you for coming here tonight. Thank you very much for being here. Cała sala. Au! Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.